Hello, folks. This is Shane R. Monroe. You're in the passenger seat with me. It's Passenger Seat Radio. Wednesday, what is it, March 12th, right? I don't know, whatever the hell the day is, who cares? And you're on my 13-mile commute home. Welcome to the show. All right, well, I was thinking I wasn't going to do another show this week, and it's like, you know what? I have nothing else to do on the way home. Why not? I had a couple of interesting stories to talk about, so why not? I have a feeling it'll segue into more stuff. So, one of my coworkers reached out to me and said, "Hey, is this you?" And she sends me this article, a link to this article, and it's about the ceiling falling in. Hey now, it's about the ceiling falling in a movie theater. And she's like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, I didn't make the connection at first, right? So I'm like, no, I wasn't in a theater where the ceiling fell. Sorry, not me. And then I realized that it happened in Wenatchee, Washington. Okay, all of a sudden it is me, right? And it turns out that it was at Liberty Theater. Liberty Theater. Now, I know Mordrock's probably not listening yet, but he will be. Those of you who are new to the show, I spent my formidable years in Wenatchee, Washington. Yes, Wenatchee. I know it's an Indian thing. I'm sorry, Native American thing. Wenatchee, Yakima, they're all Indian names in the Pacific Northwest. So this is Central Washington State. And it was at one time the apple capital of the world. That's the claim to fame for Wenatchee. And I think it's like 50,000 people in the Grand Wenatchee area. It might be up to 60,000 of these days, but it's small. But, you know, and what's really funny is I recognized the theater once I knew where it was. So it's like, oh shit, I've been in that exact theater. It was one of the ancillary theaters. So Liberty Cinema is older than dirt. I mean, Liberty Cinema might have actually had like silent movies or some shit in there. And it had like one or two screens. So it was small, right? But in order to match the big Cineplex across the river in East Wenatchee, I know, they decided to renovate. And when they renovated, they created like 3 more screens. These little tiny rooms, but it was sometimes it was almost like going to a haunted house, because these little tiny screens, you have to like navigate these winding stairs to get to them. So they were really like in the middle of nowhere inside the building. I don't remember whether or not they bought additional space from the area behind them or how they managed to work it out. But the theater that you saw in the news article, 100% was one of those little tiny ancillary ones. And it makes sense because it was higher up and it was smaller. So that's how I knew that's what it was. But apparently their ceiling fell in. There was like one couple there, and the ceiling, I think they got injured slightly, but not bad. I don't remember. But there was like practically nobody in there. But it made a lot of sense, you know. Who knows? That theater might have been right against the freaking roof. Who knows? But I started thinking about it, you know, Liberty Cinema, man, Jesus, that's where I didn't see Star Wars there. I know for a fact I saw Return of the Jedi there, because that line was unfucking believable. The line for Return of the Jedi, I shit you not, it started at Liberty Cinema, it went down the street, and then it took the next block down, the next over, and then up, so that you could see the back of the line from the front of the line, because it wrapped around the block, and then it went up the road from there. So it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. It was about 5 city blocks worth of the line when Return of the Jedi came out. No shit. I mean, that blows my mind even to think about that. No matter what movie you talk about today, or what, you know, what there's no lines like that, right? Did anybody line up to see The Last Jedi like that? Were there 5 blocks of people lined up to see that? No. Right? What's the last time there was a big freaking blockbuster like that People were sleeping days ahead of time in line, blah, blah, blah. It was a crazy time. But I saw almost all the movies in my formidable years I saw at Liberty Cinema. And even better yet, around the corner from Liberty Cinema was Liberty Video. I don't remember if the same people owned it or not, but they just got in on the name Liberty, right? Liberty Video holds the greatest memories of all to me. That's where I began my journey in collecting physical media, right? So here's the best part. So Liberty Video, it was a smallish store, right? Locally owned and operated. It wasn't Blockbuster. It wasn't any of these big chains. And there were a lot of them. You know, everybody knows Blockbuster, but you know, back in the day, Blockbuster was not the only game in town. I mean, they're mom and pops, but there were chains of video stores. It's unimaginable in today's date and time. But this wasn't a chain. This was a little tiny guy. It's always the same guy. Every time I went in there, it was the same guy. Every time. And it's like, don't you have anybody else that works here? Is this you're it, right? But yeah, he was a really, I can't remember his name, which is really weird because I usually, Ryan, never mind, I do remember it was Ryan. And they had the greatest deal of all time. There's you can't beat this deal. Sunday through Thursday, 10-cent movie rentals. All right, we're not talking 1890s 10 cents. I'm talking about 10 cents in the early 80s. So 10 movies for $1. Unbelievable, right? I mean, how great is that? And so I used to go in literally right after school. I would drive down there and I would get 10 movies, take them back to the house and start dubbing them. You know, hour and a half a piece. It was an all-night marathon thing. I was just dubbing movies, building my own personal bootleg pirate collection of movies. And the next day, I'd bring them back and get another 10. It was unbelievable that you could do that back then. And he's like, he knew what I was doing, but he wasn't going to ask. Eventually, we got close enough. He's like, dude, come on. I'm like, what? I said, you're getting your money. And he's like, dude, come on. So I used to rent all the movies and stuff from him. So it was no big deal. But then there was a period of time. So a lot of people may not remember this, but there was a period of time where movies were rental protected. There was such a market for the video rental industry that the video companies gathered together en masse and basically said, you're not going to sell to the public. You only sell to us. You sell your movies to us. We rent them out. That's the way that it is. And so what they did was, in order to make sure that happened, I don't think they were legally allowed to do that. But what ended up happening was the distributors would charge so much for a video cassette tape to the rental companies that there was no way that the public was going to buy those, right? So there was some weird number that all videotapes, whether it was the shittiest of shit movies or the greatest blockbuster of all time, every video cassette that was sold went to the video stores for $109.99, something like that. Now that's 1985 money, or 84 money, whatever it was. $100, that's a lot of bank. So the general public, they weren't partaking in that sort of purchasing. But what eventually happened was somebody had the bright idea that once videotapes weren't renting anymore, they were taking up shelf space that new movies needed to go on, we'll sell them. There's nothing in the contract that says I can't sell the movie that I bought from the distributor. So they sold them. The movies had already made their money, right? So they were renting them out. Blockbuster was renting these things out $6-7 a night. But you have it rent it 15 times, you're paid. Everything else is profit. So there was a lot of money to be made in video rentals. But then they would turn around and sell them for bargain bin prices. $14.99. Previously viewed movies, $14.99. They got all the way down to like $9.99 at one point. But the idea is you could own your movie. Now, that's after it's been, hoarded out for 500 rentals or whatever. But most of the time, and this was crazy because I would actually rent the tape, and then I would buy it after I confirmed that nobody had ever had their VCR eat it or any of that shit. So, yeah, and so I was building up. Not only was I pirating movies like fucking crazy, but I was also now able to purchase and own. And you know how it is. You know how that gets started. It's Beanie Babies and Pokemon, man. You got to have them all. So every time I found a great movie. And listen, I'll tell you what, in terms of like video rentals, the 80s were the shit. Because there was nothing going on that would prevent whatever you fucking wanted to see from coming out on tape, right? Nobody was watching that. Oh yeah, we had the MPAA, blah, blah, blah. But, videotapes were crazy. You could go in and just walk the aisles, pick up a few tapes, and they could be the greatest shit ever, It was awesome. Anyway, so, and then I had a list at home, so I'd rent them, bootleg them, and then wait for them to go on as previously owned, pick them up for $9.99, and then replace the movie on the tape, if I could, of the bootleg with something else. And eventually I ended up owning almost as many movies as I had pirated, over the time frame. But those were crazy days, man. I mean, I had the two VCRs hooked up together. Then of course, and I've told this story before, so I'm sorry if you're longtime listeners and I've already been over this shit, but I like talking about it. So eventually, VCRs, there were stores that would rent VCRs. True story. Like Blockbuster did it for a while, but I think they got out of that business. It cost them too much money. But like if you went to any medium-sized chain, you could rent a VCR for the night, for the weekend, whatever. Because VCRs cost so fucking much money, nobody could own one. I mean, rich people could own them. Upper middle class maybe could own one. But for the most part, people didn't own them. But they wanted to watch these movies at home. So they would rent VHS machines and rent movies with it and then bring the whole shit back on Monday when they were done for the weekend. Weird shit. But I ended up having two VCRs so I could pirate at leisure. But eventually, as everybody started getting more, VCRs were like, a dime a dozen. You could pick them up anywhere. They figured out that people were bootlegging their tapes. So they came up with something called Macrovision. I am never tired of talking about Macrovision. And Macrovision was a copy protection for videotapes. And essentially, I don't want to get into great technical detail. You can look it up if you want. But essentially the idea was when you played the tape in a regular VCR, right? You plugged the tape in, you watched the movie, everything was fine. But if you exported that video signal to another VCR or to certain other devices, the stability of the tape quality would just go to shit. It would be black and white, it would roll, it would flutter, it would bend. I mean, there was no way to copy it effectively because of Macrovision. And if you were one of those weird people like me, and this is how I found out about it, well, outside of the copying, if you used a video monitor, like the Commodore 1702 monitor, beautiful, made by JVC, by the way, some people don't know that. The Commodore or the 1702 monitor was beautiful. It was gorgeous. But if you hooked a VCR up to it, and you had a Macrovision protected tape, not a bootleg, but the real tape, you couldn't watch it. And since all my VCRs and shit were hooked up to that, I needed a solution. Fuck, I owned tapes that were Macrovision protected. I couldn't even watch my own tapes. Yeah, so this DRM shit, nothing new. So of course, now remember, there's no internet. There's none of that shit. You're on your own. So I subscribed to a number of magazines, video file type magazines, movie magazines, things like that. And one day in the back of the magazine was an advertisement for a little black box. And of course, the wording of it. I wish I had one. I bet I could find an ad if I went and looked online for it. But they were selling a little black box to solve your problems. And basically it was for a legitimate use case, right? For you to use this black box so that you could watch your owned videotapes on a monitor or on some other screen that would normally freak out because of the Macrovision. So it was kind of legit, but they didn't want to say, pirate all the movies you want here on black box. And it was like $80, right? Like, I'm a teenager in high school. $80, 1985 money. That's some serious fucking money. Might as well. I mean, you could buy a rental protected movie for that. But eventually, I scraped together the cash and I bought it. Ran on a 9-volt battery, and it had a video in and a video out. You plug that in between, no more Macrovision. Nice, stable picture, good to go. Well, then became the game of cat and mouse, which is what it always is with DRM and copy protection. Who's next? Hey, Turbo, what's up, man? So Macrovision evolved, and it turned out that they could do more shit to fuck up your picture. And eventually that black box no longer did the trick. Now, it must have been pretty fucking expensive, because most movies had, like, at the best, Macrovision version 1, we'll say. I don't know, there's probably a number behind it. Macrovision version 1, the black box took care of business. But if you had Macrovision version 2, 3, 4, whatever, I'm sure there had multiples of them. Like the brand new videotape, like when Indiana Jones came out, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, I remember that one being like, fuck it, you're not copying this, you're not watching this on a monitor, you're fucked, right? And of course, cat and mouse begins. Now there was a new box in the back of those video magazines saying, Macrovision got you down, we've got the solution. And this box had dials on the front. So it was like a piece of like professional video equipment. Again, this was like $149 in 1980s monies. And again, I managed to scrape together the cash and I bought one, and it worked, but it didn't work. What do I mean by that? So anything to impede you copying fucking movies, man. So they had a couple of, they had like a brightness knob, which was fine. You could just dial it in to somewhere in the middle. And then there was, what was the other knob? There were 3 of them. God, I can't remember what the third knob was. But the one in the middle, that's the money. That was the money shot. So in the middle is a dial. Did it say gain? Maybe gain. I don't remember. That's what you did to dial or filter out the Macrovision. It wasn't automatic like the little black box was. It was something else. It was bigger, better, stronger, faster. So what you had to do was, boy, did this ever fucking suck, man. Here's what you had to do. You had to put the movie in and watch the movie all the way through with the box in hand. And every time something would cause the screen to fuck up, you would dial in just a little bit, rewind it, watch the scene again, and if it's stable, you left it there, right? And then you continued watching. The next time something made the picture unstable, you would ratchet it back a little bit more, rewind it, check that spot. If it was good, you kept going. That's what you did for the entire length of the movie. Now, eventually we figured out that what causes these problems are large bursts of light. Like when Lethal Weapon, was it 2? The one with the cat in the car at the beginning? Yeah, when that fucking building blew up, the picture went totally unstable. But the more you cranked this knob, it started to deteriorate the quality of the picture, right? So it's sort of like, I guess it's like a vocal eliminator or whatever it was. And I never got deep enough. Eventually I read up on it and I understood it at the time, but I can't relate it. But essentially you were adjusting a certain gain, and the whole movie could be great until the very end. and there's a big explosion for the finale, and the picture goes blah, 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 and then it came back. And it's like, God damn it. And I wanted perfect copies. So there you go. So, I mean, that definitely slowed people down, even though it didn't stop us. And then eventually, of course, right, tapes went away and DVDs came, and that brought up a whole new thing. But here's some interesting stuff. They eventually started releasing products with digital buffers. This started off, I think, on camcorders. So essentially what would happen is, as the video was being recorded or played on these little handy cams, I think they were called back then, every time a frame was being rendered, it was being snapshot digitally, and that's what was being output. They called them digital stabilizers. And they drastically improved the quality of your recording or your playback. Well, the bonus piece of this was digital stabilizers, you didn't have to be recording at the time. So what people were doing, I swear to God this is true, people were buying camcorders that had a digital stabilizer and routing that in between their two VCRs. True story. And that digital stabilizer frame grab digital shit would actually completely remove Macrovision. Gone, zero zilch, no little twisty knob, no nonsense, no bullshit. It was there and it just worked. And then, of course, eventually somebody thought it'd be fun to release a 4-head hi-fi stereo VCR with a digital frame buffer, and that became the go-to for piracy, right? So there you go. And that's all thanks to good old Liberty Video and Liberty Cinema, right? Liberty Cinema. Now short one roof. But hey, what do you want? But yeah, I thought it was, that just brought all those memories back. I got a shout out on the most recent Amigo channel. Aaron said you agreed to interview but haven't had time. Oh, really? I thought I did it. Maybe I didn't do an interview with them. Interesting. I'll reach out and do an interview with them. I really enjoyed doing that one with Matt Barton talking about copy protection. That was one of my favorite interviews. I'm not used to being the one interviewed, so that's kind of fun. I'll reach out. I'll give him the time. No problemo. I'll check my email, see if I can get on there. I'd love to do that. I have it all written down, what happened when Amiga died, because I was there. I was literally in the crematorium when they rolled Amiga's corpse into the incinerator. So I've got it all documented in a text file, but it's probably worthwhile for me to bring that up and do like a show on it or a video or something, because there's not too many people that were there at the end. I mean, there was a room of 10 people and I was one of the 10. How often does that happen? You know, watching Petro Trzynski or whatever his name was fucking put the last mound of dirt on top of the Amiga's grave, bastards. Just makes me sad, man. I was strolling through my YouTube algorithm, and it recommended some Amiga thing, it was Computer Chronicles or something. And you know, it's funny, if you watch, like, if you remember Computer Chronicles, it was sort of like it was almost like a news magazine for computer stuff. But for some reason, only like business shit got on there. They never covered Commodore 64, the Atari 800, or the Amiga. It was always the same old boring ass fucking IBM PC with green screen, fucking PC beeping speakers. It was just shit. But that's what they always did. And I imagine there was probably a sponsorship or something involved. I was too young to like make that connection. But so I would tune into Computer Chronicles on TV as a kid. Just to see it. Maybe they're talking about the Amiga. Maybe they'll talk about the Commodore 64. Maybe they'll talk about one of these machines I give a shit about. But it never was. It was never that. New version of Lotus 123. Yeah, fuck off. How about we show some Amiga 2000? That's what I want to see. They did. I've seen many of them. Yeah, they did. They did. But when I tuned in, right, this isn't being fed. This is like once a week when Computer Chronicles, and I happened to catch it. It was never what I wanted to see, but they did. And you're right, they're all up on YouTube, and that's what I ran into the other day. And it's like, oh, holy shit, look at that. They did cover the Amiga once or twice. And Jim Butterfield was always there to cover Commodore shit. That little arrogant bag fucking asshat, I hated him. Jim Butterfield was such an egotist bastard, but he was always there. He was like the face of Commodore. And you wonder why Commodore ended up taking a shit. It's because they had people like that. And our buddy Petro from ESCOM running the show, you know? But yeah, so it was kind of interesting. And it was never like the whole episode. You know, they had segments, you know, like any other like news magazine thing. And so like it would show the Amiga or Commodore 64 or whatever. It would show it for like 10 minutes. They'd go to commercial. They'd come back. They'd do another 10 minutes on something. They'd go to commercial, come back, and then the show was over. And so like when you're looking at this and you're seeing what the $10,000 top of the line IBM PC fucking compatible shit was doing, I'm not shocked that they probably got spanked for showing the Amiga or the Atari ST or one of these other computers that was literally running circles around that fucking shit, giving them the finger. You know, we've got 4-channel stereo sound. We've got, you know, not high resolution graphics, but we've got high resolution color graphics. We've got this, and then there's this little fucking nonsense machine over here. The Apple got a lot of coverage too. I remember that, and it was always an Apple II. You know, it wasn't even a color Apple. It was always some shitty green screen Apple, TRS-80 Model 3s, you know. It was just funny. It's like, God damn it. Why aren't you talking about the good shit? I want to talk Amiga stuff, man. Come on. But yeah, I should probably document that at some point. Do like a live Q&A. Not that anybody fucking cares, right? Nobody will show up. To talk about the final days of Amiga and watching them. Oh, I thought someone was going to run into my ass. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I need to document it because it's important. It's sort of like that karaoke, the laser karaoke show that I did. You know, I needed that documented. I was there when something important happened. You know, laser karaoke, I was there when it started. I was there when karaoke basically hit the United States. You know, that's exciting. I was part of something brand new that is still, well, it's not nearly the phenomenon it used to be, but karaoke endured, and I was there. You know, it's like being there when MP3 came out, right? That was huge. Doesn't matter anymore. Much like karaoke, things come and go. But when you're there for the sign of the times, that's really exciting. So, and I was thinking to myself, that sort of the wisdom, like a lot of stuff gets lost. You always hear stories about kids going to their ailing parents and with a tape recorder or phone in this case, and saying, tell me stories of your youth, right? This is how it used to be. That's how it was done, right? If you go back to Native Americans, you go back to ancient civilizations, history was told through story, and honestly, that's kind of not really the way it's done anymore. You don't get the stories passed on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, and nowadays it's interesting because everything is sort of immortalized now, which is good and bad, right? Depending on how you want to look at it. But there was a period of time, and if you were alive during this time, you know what I'm talking about. There was a period of time when technology was in this weird transitional flux. And that era of time is really hard to get data from. And what do I mean by that? Well, when I started doing that karaoke video, the laser karaoke thing, I thought it would be super easy to get lots of footage, lots of pictures, lots of everything from those times, because that was it. You couldn't, if you were around at that time and cognizant, every place was a karaoke bar. You could walk down the street and one block you'd pass 2 or 3 karaoke bars. It was unbelievably crazy. It was a thing. And you would think that if it was that popular and that pervasive, that there'd be media all over about it. There's not. And you know why? Because it was during that dead period of time when people were no longer taking and capturing photographs like traditional photographs. The smartphone wasn't out yet. And even if they were out, only the rich people had them, and they didn't really take very good pictures. So people at some point in time stopped walking around with cameras and video cassette recorders and all this shit, but the digital versions weren't out yet. There's an era of time that's remarkably dead. Now, there's newscasts, right? So you can find newscasts, you can find this. I see I need to take a call. I'm gonna end the show. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.